Welcome to the Content 10X Podcast, the show where content creators learn how to harness the power of content repurposing. And now, your host, Amy Woods.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Content 10X Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, and this week is all about consistency of messaging and why it's so important and how repurposing can help you be consistent with your messaging. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make with their content, and particularly people who are trying to build a personal brand, people who have small businesses and put themselves front and center in order to grow that business, is that they are too inconsistent with their messaging. So if we're creating content in order to grow our business, so we're not just creating content for content's sake, but it's time consuming and there needs to be an ROI on creating all of this content, and that's to grow our business, then we need to make sure that it's clear exactly what we do. We need to be clear and consistent with our message. And as I said, that's one of the biggest mistakes that I often see people make, is complete inconsistency with messaging. So we need to be clear on the problem that we solve for people. So you need to make it so clear in all of your messaging that when people have that problem, they come to you. So what I see is people have this scattergun approach with their messaging. 1 minute they're talking about one thing, the next minute they're talking about something else. 1 minute they're talking about entrepreneurship, the next minute it's miracle mornings and getting up early, the next minute it's productivity and so on. So people don't really associate you with one thing. And then in doing this, no matter how hard you try and how great that content may be, you're not growing a strong personal brand if people cannot really say in one sentence what you do and what it is that you help people with. So I see this happen quite a lot in the world of marketing, where someone is a Facebook ads expert 1 minute, then there's content on Instagram growth hacking, and then there's content on sales copy, email marketing. You get the gist. And so it seems as though, okay, this person is a marketing expert and they know a lot about online marketing. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. And if they want to be known for general online marketing and people want that general online marketing help, then they're putting out content for that. But there's no real specialism there. And maybe they actually have a business that is more specialist. So they're putting all this content out there, but what they actually are is a Facebook ad specialist or an email marketing specialist. And that isn't clear because there's that inconsistency in messaging. And we all strive to work with specialists to help us. So let's say, for example, if I wanted to enter the world's strongest woman competition, which I don't, by the way, but let's say that I do. Now, I could go to a general personal trainer to help me, or I could go to a personal trainer who specialises in strength training, or I could go to a personal trainer who specialises in getting women competition ready for strongest women and men competitions. Now, I'm hardly going to look at the general PT when I've heard that I can get that level of specialism. So that's what I mean here in terms of, if you have a specialism, then make sure that your content is consistent and that you're sharing that message in the right way, because people will be really drawn to you when they have a problem that they know that you can solve. So content repurposing helps you be consistent. My recommendation is that you focus on one type of long-form content, whether that's a blog, a podcast, video content, whichever you're most comfortable with. Focus on one form of long-form content and do that consistently and regularly. So let's say weekly. What you need to do is be really clear on what you want to be known for and what your overall message is. Then share that message every week in your core long-form content. So looking at it from different angles, different tips and advice, and adding value in different ways, but always being true to that message that you want to be consistent with. And then take that message and repurpose it across other platforms. So let's say the focus is one message a week aligned with your core overall message. Repurpose and repeat. So spend the week repurposing that message on different social media platforms, different online locations, and in different formats. The same message, but communicated in different ways to different people in different places. You can repurpose for longer than a week, of course, but that's a really good way to go about it. This keeps you consistent. This completely prevents the scattergun approach, and it helps you become known for what you want to be known for. Now, I think a problem that lots of people have with this is that we know so much, and it's hard to keep that in. It's hard not to share what we know. Sometimes it can be so hard to stay consistent with our messaging because of that. So I'm a prime example. I've always tried to stay consistent with my messaging regarding content repurposing. I want to be known as the world's leading expert on content repurposing. I want people to think, I really want to get some help with content repurposing. I must contact Amy Woods. That will grow my business. Now, if people associate the issue of not repurposing content well, of not getting enough value from their content and not reaching as many people through their content, and they're frustrated and want to get more from it, and they associate that problem and frustration with me and Content 10X and the fact that we can solve that problem, then all of my content and my personal branding is working. Also, I want event organisers to think if we need a speaker on content repurposing, let's call Amy. I want podcasters who want to do an episode on content repurposing to think, right, let's get in touch with Amy, and so on. So that's becoming known for what I want to become known for. I also want people to think of more than content repurposing. I want to represent the values of Content 10X, of really high quality content, of being innovative, of being slick with our approach, and being friendly and approachable as well. So they're all of our core values, and I want to make sure that I'm consistent with that messaging as well. So I guess it's a bit like Ghostbusters when they say who you're going to call. If you see a ghost, call Ghostbusters. For content repurposing, who you're going to call, I want people to say Content 10X and Amy Woods, and that's what I've always tried to do. And I ensure that my podcast and blog content is about repurposing. Even if I have guests on who come from different backgrounds and specialisms, I always invite them on to have a discussion about repurposing in some way, shape or form. So, I could share content about other things, other marketing aspects. As a business owner, I could be sharing content about growing a business. As someone who's got lots of experience in growing teams and people management and leadership, I could share content about that. I could talk about things I've done previously. I've won leadership and people development awards in the past. And, I could just talk about all those things, or sales, mergers, acquisitions. But the fact is, just because I could doesn't mean that I should, because that would make me completely inconsistent with my messaging, inconsistent with my brand. I wouldn't stand for anything in particular. What we do would be diluted by different things that I'm saying, and people would not think content repurposing Amy Woods. They'd hear my name and they wouldn't really know what they think, I guess. They'd just maybe think of the last thing that I was speaking about and remember that I spoke about something else, and it would become very hazy, and that's not what we want. It wouldn't be great for my business at all. So what I think is so good about content repurposing is it helps you retain a core message and be consistent with that message. It helps you to show people that you can communicate that in different formats, and consistency of messaging in different formats and different platforms is exactly what content repurposing is about. Now, I heard someone say recently that reputation times reach equals rewards. I think that was right, or reputation times reach equals success. I thought this was really good. I loved this because I think consistent messaging helps you build that reputation. And it is right that your reputation needs to then reach people, to help people know and then trust you and then want to work with you. So I want to provide an example of this. My good friend, Mark Asquith, who is the CEO of Rebel Base Media, a podcasting tech company. They're behind Captivate, a new podcast host that this podcast is hosted on, and many of Content 10X's clients are hosted on Captivate. Also podcast websites, Productivity. He has a studio that my audiobook was recorded in. So Mark's very much in the podcasting space, okay? He was on episode 87 of the Content 10X podcast where he spoke about repurposing of his TEDx talk. But he used to have a personal brand under the name Excellence Expected, under the banner Excellence Expected. And his content was really quite varied. It was about entrepreneurship, startups. To a large extent, when I first met Mark, it was about personal development and a lot about personal branding as well. That's what I saw Mark speak about, and also about websites too, because of his podcast websites business. All really good, really quality content, but very varied. And there wasn't anything wrong with that, because Mark was providing business coaching and that content was a funnel to his business coaching. But he decided that he wanted to be known for podcasting. What he wanted to go all in on was podcasting. And he wanted to be known as that British podcast guy, basically. So how did he achieve this? Well, by becoming completely consistent with his messaging. No more content, podcast episodes, etc., about startups or personal branding, etc., unless it had the angle of podcasting. So very much like me with content repurposing. Now, Mark's content is always about podcasting. Whatever he talks about, the angle will be for a podcaster and helping podcasters become better at being podcasters. So he has 3 episodes a week on his podcast, The Podcast Accelerator, always about podcasting. His website is now focused on that. On his social media, he's actually got that British podcast guy written into his bios, and that's on his website too. So just a really good example of really going from fairly varied content to consistent content, and then becoming even more known for exactly what you want to be known for, and controlling what you want to be known for by controlling your content and your message and what you're putting out there. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't share other content on social media, because you should. There's the human side, it's social. So I share things that I like to do, like cooking, going to the gym, drinking margaritas that are bigger than my head. But that's different to the business content. And the business content, that's what needs to be consistent in messaging. And then it's great to have other content that people get to know you a little bit more and what you're all about. So really my point of this episode is to become known, you need to have consistent messaging. Repurposing your content to ensure you are consistent across platforms and formats is a really good way of being consistent with that messaging. Solve that problem for people and they will know and trust you. Your reputation times your reach will lead to results. So thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast episode. I really, really do appreciate it. If you haven't got your copy yet, then don't forget to get a copy of my brand new book, Content 10X, More Content, Less Time, Maximum Results. You can just go to Amazon and put in Content 10X and you'll find the book there. So really appreciate it if you get a copy of that book and find out how you can reach more people online via repurposing. If you're interested in our done for you content repurposing service, then head on over to content10x.com. And also don't forget to follow me on social media on all of the social platforms at Content 10x. So again, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and I'll catch you in the next one.